Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Lost Souls podcast. I'm your host Alex, and today we're going to be talking about dreams. And it's a really broad word to just start talking about because dreams, you can have a lot of different dreams. And I guess there's this distinction between your sleeping dreams and your waking dreams. And daydream roughly falls into waking dreams, but there are waking dreams which wouldn't necessarily be daydreams, right? Because either way, they're just these like mental images you have. Like while you're sleeping, you don't have that much control over them. I mean, unless you can lucid dream. I've never been able to do it, but I hear it's a possibility. So, but and then you have waking dreams, and there's still a mental image of like your desires or what you want to be doing or just anything really. But there's this weird overlap between like our aspirations in terms of dreams and just like what you like want. Like, oh, I wish I was playing like as a kid sitting in a classroom daydreaming. You're like, I don't know, I wish I was on a playground or I wish I was playing video games right now. And those aren't really aspirations, but they are daydreams. But dreams can also refer to like Dr. Martin Luther King and his "I Have a Dream" speech, his dream for the world. Right? That was hardly like the same thing as playing on a playground, right? But they're still both dreams. And then you also have like the absolute chaotic madness, at least in my experience, of sleeping dreams where everything goes, pretty much. Like the craziest stuff can happen and the brain's just like, yep, this makes sense, and we're experiencing it. And what's worse is 9 times out of 10, I actually enjoy it. Like sleeping. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but or not sleeping. I mean, I do enjoy sleeping, but dreaming. I rarely come out of a dream and I'm like, that was some shit fucking dreaming. You know, that was some bad sleep movie, right? Because really, what is dreaming? It's like your brain staying active while you're sleeping, in a way, right? And they almost do kind of function like your own brain movies. Like, well, I think I keep like it's almost like your brain's going, I gotta keep this dude entertained while he's like laying here sleeping. Although I'm not sure if that's good or not. I wonder if we just didn't have dreams at all, if we'd sleep better. Like we'd actually rest properly. But, anyway, I digress. It's kind of funny, though, how, like, sleep and dreams specifically, people really, like, are big on the interpretations. Like, oh, these are these themes that pop up across dreams, and this is what this represents in this dream. Like, I don't know. Like, for instance, a flower might represent love or something like that, or a rose. Like if you see a rose in your dream, that's some representation of love, right? And it's kind of weird that people spend so much time and energy just like deconstructing these things that to me they seem to be like actual experiences. Like these are perhaps not like reality. Like there's this disconnection from reality and dreaming. I guess that's why you have to call them dreams, right? Because this isn't stuff that actually happens. It's stuff that happens in your head, right? And it's not so nice all the time, you know. It can be great though. It can actually be some of the most fulfilling experiences of your life, and they can allow you to experience, like dreams can allow you to experience things you may never get to experience otherwise. For instance, last night I dreamt that I had a girlfriend. Uh, and you know that's the only place I've ever got to experience that. I mean, it might be whatever it is, but it was nice while it lasted. I might not have somebody to hold my hand and put their head on my shoulder, go on dates with me while I'm awake, but maybe I can have a dream girlfriend. Although the way the dream ended, I think it was going to end pretty badly. Yeah, we'll see. I'll probably never pick up that dream again, although I kind of wish I could. And that's sad. Because I wonder how many people would rather live in dream world than they would in reality, right? Because I know I would. Like you say, like people talk about the Matrix and how scary that would be, but like Or like, I guess another example would be like the Infinite Tsukuyomi from like Madara's plan at the end of Naruto. If I have any like big anime nerds listening to me who like also like Naruto and didn't just quit because everybody said it was mid, and you know it kind of is, but it doesn't change the fact that I grew up with it. You know what I mean? But it's like that. Like if you could put everybody into a dream for them to live out their entire life, like in just in their head, in their minds. If it was like Madara, right, to where it's like they're living out their best dream life, and that's all they have a conception of, is like this best dream life. I mean, I guess it doesn't even have to be the best dream life, but it can definitely be something better than what they're experiencing in reality. Would you? Like, would you plug in for the rest of your life? You know, hop in. I'm never waking up again. I'm gonna enter the dreamscape, and I'm never coming out. Because I think there are a lot of people that would. I really do. Maybe this is something for like polling or what, but and a lot of people, you get a lot of like good stuff in reality, and I guess if you never experienced reality, you wouldn't have the conception to form the dreams, like the ideas that form the dreams in the first place. I don't know. Nobody's actually been in that scenario to where they've not had any interaction with anything on the outside world. And oh wait, hold on, I just thought of something. Can I'll have to look into that at some point. In fact, I might look into that right now, but I'm going to look up blind people dreaming, because that has now got me really curious. And maybe that's like too far in me, but I'm too interested now. Hold on. All right, just looked into it, and from what I can tell, blind people do experience dreams, but they still experience dreams from the limits of their own experience, right? So they don't have visual dreams, which to me sounds crazy, but then I think about the fact that that there's a lot going on in dreams. Like you can feel, I'll take the example last night. I was walking around a terrace with the girlfriend in my head, and she put her head on my shoulder and held my hand, and I felt that. That's a feeling, a sense aside from just seeing it, just being sight. And so So dreams are really limited by the experiences. So there is no dream without reality, I guess, right? Because how am I supposed to dream of something if I don't have a concept for something, like a perception of other things? So dreams come back to just being some form of perception, right? Because if we can't perceive anything, our brain can't create images from what we perceive, right? Like if we exist, like say we were the only thing we did for an entire life was float in the vacuum of space. The only thing we even could dream about was rocks and stars, right? Is that how it would work? That seems to be how it would work. So the brain just ends up being a reconstruction of what happens to us. And that's not exactly what happens, because we can have things that haunt us in dreams, right? Like I had a dream when I was 5, I still think about to this day, and it was not a nice dream. I was shimmying along a cliffside, and this is a 5-year-old dream. I don't know how I thought of this when I was 5, but I was like shimmying along a cliffside, like next to the ocean. That standard like treacherous ocean cliffside, with like the spiky rocks coming out of the bottom of the shore, like in the bay, and somehow there was this small ledge that I had to climb along. Like I didn't create the rest of the dream, or if I did, don't remember it. I just remember being along the dream, and I was with like my dad, and we were shimmying along the cliffside, and it was storming, right? There was like a massive storm. There was lightning and thunder, and I fell off. The worst thing that could happen, fell off into the spiky cliffs below, and somehow I didn't die, right? Like somehow I'm sitting there, but at this point in time I couldn't swim, so I'm sitting there drowning. Maybe, and there was this one time when I was a kid where I kind of like couldn't swim and kind of like went under in my grandparents' pool. So maybe that had something to do with it. And I think it happened around the same time, so maybe that's why that dream popped up. But I remember like before I was like struggling, couldn't swim or anything, and then my dad came and got me. And because Dream Logic, he came and surfaced and then was able to just like stand. I guess kind of like how it would work in a pool setting. And he was like kind of holding me in his arms, and then I hear, a loud like shot, like a shot from a gun, and he'd been shot and killed. Me in his arms after he'd saved me. And I still think about that all the time. Like, I'm not sure if haunting is a good word for it because I understand that distinction. I understand it's just a dream, but damn, that shit gets scary sometimes. You know, and it doesn't actually, like, the thing about dreams is they don't actually have to be able to happen. Like, of course that didn't happen. That never existed. But it's still like, there's still the image of it there, right? Or I guess it's like when you get like the boyfriend who has the idea of the cheating girlfriend, and the girlfriend the idea of the cheating boyfriend. It works either way. Like, once you got that image in your head, then you see it everywhere, right? Like, you never, even if it never actually happened, and that's a different story because it definitely could have. Like, people don't tend to just come up with things out of their ass. Like, if there's a woman and she thinks her man's cheating, well, there's a reason she thinks her man's cheating, or even like with the guy. Like, people think things for reasons. People act ways for reasons. Like, people like to like go around and shit on like all these people because, how could they act this way? How could they do this? How could they behave in a certain way? People do all those things for reasons. You might not know those reasons. You may never know those reasons. But every action a person takes does have a reason behind it. There's little in this world that's completely and utterly meaningless, if nothing else than being shaped by previous experiences, right? But then you get into some weird territory with dreams, because dreams don't seem to only be locked into the realm of fantasy. And I'm not saying this happens all the time, as far and few between, but there's a phenomenon that I would say science, number one, isn't trying to study enough, because they have their answer for it. And you may or may not know where I'm going with this by now, but what I'm talking about is deja vu, right? Deja vu in scientific terms is like the feeling that you've been here and done this before, like exactly what you're doing, right? Now, I can tell you my experience with deja vu and how I disagree with that interpretation, and it might make me out to be like a loon or whatever you want to call me, but straight up, to me, what is called deja vu is whenever I dream something and then it happens, right? And so I've had this happen to me a handful of times in my life. It's not like this common thing that happens to me all the time. And I've gotten into trouble before because I had a dream that I thought was going to happen, and then I'm like, oh, that's all I need, right? It was another one of those situations where I had a girlfriend. And I was like, oh, like, because it seemed real and it seemed like it was going to happen somehow. And I'm like, oh, that's all I need. Like, it's going to happen. And then, you wait for something that never comes. So it can be dangerous, and you shouldn't just trust dreams. And if you have a realistic feeling dream, you don't just go, oh my God, this is going to happen, because, like, you don't know. But it doesn't change the fact that sometimes, in my personal experience, subjectively, right, this isn't an objective dissemination of dreams. This is my own subjective interpretation of what's going on here. Now you dream it, and then it could be a week or a month or a few years later. It seems like the dreams always stick out. That's kind of how I get it, because like whenever this happens, the dreams seem to like stick out in my head, and it's like down to like every detail. Like, my thoughts are the same. Like, I have a conception of what I'm thinking at the time, right? And so the thoughts I have in the dream are the thoughts I have when they happen in real life. And it's not like I'm like, oh, this is cool. No, this shit's scary, bro, because this like upends the way that I view the world. Like, if for this to be true, it completely has to upend everything I think about the world, because that would mean that in some way, shape, form, or fashion, there's a through line to the future, because here, or like either my consciousness or something else, right? Because in that dream, if this actually happens, and I do believe it does, if this actually happens, that means somehow I've stepped into a future version of myself, right? So number one, this would imply like, oh hey, like the future is kind of set, right? Like there is this thing called fate or destiny or whatever you want to call it, and because how if the universe was constantly in flux, there is no way to predict what's going to happen in the future, and surely the brain can't just conceptual like especially like some of the things I had because I was a kid and like I just this is the dumbest stuff sometimes. Like I think the first time it ever happened, I was like 5 or 6, and the dream. And I thought this shit was never. When it happened, I thought this shit was never gonna happen. Like I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, oh, just some dream where I'm like waving a stick around in my bedroom, right? That's all it was. I was waving a stick around in my bedroom, like I think I was pretending to be like Harry Potter or something, as kids do. Well, I guess as adults do too. Have you ever been to an anime convention? I've not, but they're all pretending to be anime characters, right? Right? And, but the stick, just waving a stick around as a kid, and then it happening, right? The dream happening, and you're like exactly. I can still remember the image. I can't remember the sounds, but I can still remember the image. And the only reason I know it is because I had like when I was a kid, I had like this Harry Potter wand type thing, like not just a stick, right? This was a replica of a Harry Potter wand. It had like the little grip at the bottom, and it was brown, and it was cool. I liked it. But like I had the dream before I even had that thing, right? And maybe it's just a false memory. I gotta like actually confront that and say like, oh, this is just like some false memory implanted into my head or something that didn't actually happen the way that I remember it. And sure, it could be that, but I just don't think it is. It could be. I'm not gonna like if you can give me hard proof that never happened and it's just that. Well, sure, I'd probably believe you, but this is also my experience, and I don't really get along when you tell me how I have experienced my life. So, back to the point where I started, it's like your brain can't just predict that something like that's going to happen, right? Like no matter if you have like level 1000 like observation hockey or something like that, right? Or you can, or like I'm gonna call it chess stratagem. Like you can see the moves happening before they ever happen. Like you know exactly where things are gonna go, right? Even the best person in the world at strategizing and predicting the future from what's in front of them couldn't create these scenarios to happen. It's certainly not in the way that the dreams seem to reconstruct them, right? So it's not that you're just predicting what might happen or will happen. It's that through line, determinism. It's one of the big reasons I'm what people would call a determinist, and that I think that there may be no such thing as free will, and that's like a big stance to take because it feels like we have free will, and sure we have the illusion of free will, and the illusion of free will is what keeps us going because it like you still choose to do the things you do even if you're gonna do them, right? So even if you're gonna go become the president of the United States, say that's like the thing you're gonna do, right? That's your destiny to be the president. Then it's not like that's just gonna fall into your lap, but no, because you're gonna be the president, you do the things that are gonna make you president, right? Like it's one and the same. Like it's always gonna happen like that. And so that also means that everything that's ever happened to me was supposed to happen to me. Everything I've ever experienced, there was like maybe there's no reason for it to have happened. Like maybe it did just happen, but it was at the same time it was always destiny that would, even if it's a meaningless destiny, right? It was still destiny. And if you want like a little more to like this whole deterministic view of the world, Like we don't have free will. Like if you want a little more, because I have like a good example here, like just lined up ready for whenever I guess I ask myself for it. And then no, I'm not the person who came up with this example. I just think it illustrates a point very well. Any moment is determined by the moment which immediately preceded it, right? So like if you want to think of like a ball in motion, right? That's probably the easiest way, and use a physics example, I know. But you throw a ball into the air and you stop it halfway through its arc, right? Like I guess at the peak, right? What determines how that ball acts? Well, to start, it was when you threw it, right? But as you threw it, what determined how it went to the next moment? And that was the momentum it had, the force that was acted upon it, right? And if none of those had ever happened, it wouldn't be acting the way it does now. The air friction, the gravity, right? All that. All of that is determining what happens in the next moment, right? And so, if you want to think about it like a step, right? It's like a computer simulation, right? It goes boing, like advance one frame, like you're playing a video game, advance one frame, and then the conditions of that frame affect the next frame, and the conditions of that frame affect the next frame, right? And so, if you take that back, that's a very small example, but you take that on a much grander scale. Every moment is determined by the moment which preceded it, and just keep following that trail back to like the beginning of time or what have you. And it's like, is there free will? Or is like the human species like created free will? Like we used to have none and now we have it. Like I'm not sure I believe that. That would be awful grandiose of the human race to believe that like, oh hey, we broke free of the thing that binds everything in the universe because we're so much better than that. And like, no. Like if you really want to think we have free will in that way, then I'm sorry. But I think you're mistaken. Alright, and now moving on to the next part. Here, I want to talk about difference between dreams and hallucinations, because here's the thing. Hallucinations, from my understanding of them, are when dream-like entities appear in physical reality, right? Nobody else sees them, but you see them, right? But wouldn't these still be dreams of some sort? Right? Waking dreams that you can visually see, but now it takes it out of the definition that I just described for dreams, right? Because dreams are mental images, and hallucinations tend to be visual images, right? Like these are things you see. In a way, an hallucination can be more real than a dream ever thought about being, because it's not just locked up in your head. Like, it's pretty hard to deny something's existence if you can physically see it, right? And so imagine if like somebody hadn't like taken like drugs or something, which is how people usually like hallucinate, right? Or like imagine this completely healthy person who is like what people would call schizophrenic, right? Who sees hallucinations or sees things that nobody else sees, right? Imagine sitting down and like other than that they're completely healthy. They don't have like a history of drug abuse or anything like that. Like they're just a completely healthy person who happened to develop schizophrenia. And say that they've got like a literal friend. Like a literal friend, like the imaginary friends that people used to have as kids. I know, I did. Just standing there waiting around, and they see them all the time. All the time around them. Imagine trying to convince that person that they're not real. Like seriously, sit down and imagine trying to convince somebody that what they are seeing is false. You'd have a really hard time, wouldn't you? Even if, because what are you going to do? You have a mental health disorder, and, aside from that, they're all good, right? They're not unhappy or unfulfilled in any way, right? So, imagine this. They're not unhappy or unfulfilled in any way. They have a good job. They're a functional adult, which is more than, I can say, right? And they're just living a good life in society. Not a good life, but, a decent life to where they're not harming anybody, and, maybe they have a family, maybe they don't have a family. Maybe that's the whole point. The imaginary friend they have is they have that as a replacement for any actual human interaction. But what if this is all this person has, and this is this has been with this person for as long as they can remember? just because you don't see them doesn't make them not real, right? Just because nobody else sees them isn't never going to convince this person they're not real, because to them, they are, right? Like, to them, they're there. To them, they talk to them. To them, they're their companion. To them, they're their friend. And no amount of, like, blowing smoke up somebody's ass, or no amount of trying to pull the wool from over their eyes is ever going to change the fact that, like, you're just, like, it's like when you see something somebody else does it, and they're like, "Oh no, like I don't see it there." You're like, "You're a dumbass," right? Wouldn't that be the same situation? To where you're gonna be like, "No, you just can't see. Like, bro, you're just dumb. Like, you're just not doing this shit right." Like, to me, it seems like, yeah, like that's exactly what would happen. And what right would anybody else have to take that away from somebody, right? Like, say your brain completely constructs a completely elaborate and fake person to spend all your time with, right? Let's say that happens. Who would anybody else be to take that away from you? Like, in my mind, it's like, if your brain has like the energy and willpower to completely create another person to be with you at all times, I'm not sure I want to take that away from you, man, because that's like something really hard to find. Or maybe it's all about living in reality, right? Which, if it was all about living in reality, we wouldn't have TV shows, we wouldn't have movies, we wouldn't have any of the media entertainment that we have, because all that shit is fake. We wouldn't have wrestling, we wouldn't have video games, we wouldn't have, I don't know, OnlyFans. We wouldn't have Instagram, we wouldn't have Facebook, we wouldn't, like, there's so much stuff we wouldn't have if life was just about living in reality. Right, on some level, you gotta have dreams to ever get anywhere. And there seems to be this odd relationship between drugs and dreams, right? I'm not sure if it's like, I think it's that drugs tend to suppress dreaming, right? Because, like, you have all these stories of people who, when they stop smoking pot, they have these crazy dreams. I think that even happens for people who drink alcohol. So it's not just something that's limited to one drug, right? You can smoke a lot of pot, or you can drink a lot of alcohol. When you come off of either, you end up having like this backlog of dreams. It just like floods your sleep space. That's what I'm gonna call it. But, like, why? I mean, I guess there's an actual scientific reason, but why is it that drug use tends to inhibit dream production? Why is it that, you know, they seem to have some relation? Because it's like when I'm taking ibuprofen, like if I'm taking ibuprofen, right, I'm not going to expect for my dreams to stop because I'm taking an ibuprofen every day. When I'm on antibiotics, I'm not going to like expect that my dreams stop because I'm taking the antibiotic, right? But if I'm smoking weed, you might want to expect to stop dreaming for a little while. Maybe that's like this odd. Maybe it's just just because of what these drugs do. Maybe it's something to do with the dopamine levels or what have you. I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist. The only thing I was drawing attention to is that like they're connected somehow. I think dreams. They're very wildly, right? Because I think there are some people who only dream in like monochrome, like in black and white. Well, that's not me. I definitely dream in color, personally, but I don't think everybody does. And so dreams themselves are like they're subjective, but they're different for everybody. And I guess that only ties back into the whole like I had to look up how blind people dream, right? Because I was just curious. I was genuinely curious because to me dreaming seems to be a rather visual experience, right? It's all about the mental images, which a mental image doesn't have to be visual, I suppose. I guess it's a weird way to think about an image, but an image doesn't have to be visual necessarily. Like you could have an echo. I guess it's called an echo when it's auditory or something. I'm not sure. But an echo in your head, like when you hear like your own internal dialogue or you hear somebody's voice in your head, and I don't mean like, oh, there's somebody like talking to you. I mean like when you imagine, like say you're imagining like a scene, like you know how the memes go, where like I can hear this image. That's what I'm talking about, right? How like you see something you've heard 1,000 times or something that really stuck out in your memory, and then when you look at the image, you can hear what was being said in that moment, right? You hear. I say hear loosely because it's not like it's booming in your ear, but it's like it's there, and you can hear it, but it's like it's weird, and unless you've experienced it, I really can't describe it for you. It's just weird, man. Dreams are weird. Dreams are different, and dreams like I'm not sure if we should like tout the brain as like, man, like this shit can do a lot of shit. It can It can create all these different images and stuff that, you know, are wonderful, or like you can do a lot of stuff. Or if it's like, damn, we need to like put dreams on blast because they're like breaking up what we consider to be reality. And like, but they're literally as subjective can be. I don't mean that like in any way except what I say, because every single dream is unique to the person having the dream. Like, even if two people have the quote unquote same dream, they're gonna be different because they're both from the perspective of the person who is experiencing the dream. And I'm not even sure, maybe, like, I've never experienced a dream to where I had like this bird's eye view. Well, not a bird's eye view. I've either experienced it as like myself, or like I've had these, like, in a dream last night I had this weird slideshow like happen, and it wasn't like before, like I wasn't sitting in a movie theater. I just saw the slideshow, which is like a lore spill of like the entire dream, you know, like the major historical events that had been happening in the background while I was sitting with my girlfriend. Sometimes I surprise myself, I swear. But like they're all like the own person's like interpretations of everything. Like there is no objective dream, right? Like the closest we might get are like the deja vu I mentioned earlier. That's the closest you're going to get to an objective dream, and those are completely rejected by the scientific community. You know, as being objective, they're just super subjective. They're like, to them, deja vu is like an extra layer of subjective, because it's like you thinking and feeling like you've experienced this before, when like I just have my issues with that whole thing. But that's, you know, that's a me thing. But regardless of whether or not they're real or not, or how objective or subjective they are, they can be important. Like, they can be anywhere from harmless and innocuous, or to joyful and full of excitement, to absolutely destructive, right? There's this there is no like good or bad dream, so much as you dream and they have like their own. They can be anything. They can be just as wild and varied as like the world around us can be. And, you know, they really do impact our lives, even if they aren't, you know, real. Like, I've never had this happen, and I hope that this doesn't actually happen, but I fear that it does, right? Where it's like, I just know this, the memes where it's like your girl, like the guy making the meme, and it's like, your girl, I dreamt you cheated on me last night, and the guy like, but I didn't. But in my dream you did. And like, she's mad because in her dream he cheated on her, right? Like, that unreal dream in having a real impact on these people's lives. You know, if that ever happened, then like I don't know if it does. I have no idea, but it could. It definitely could. Or not even like those dreams, but like the Martin Luther King dream, right? To where these almost ideals of how we think society should be and function. Those end up being what drive people a lot of the time. And, you know, it kind of just shows that things don't have to be super real to have an impact, right? Like think of like pretty much any piece of entertainment or media that you've ever like watched or consumed is a better word for it, and like ever. Like, think about anime or movies or whatever. These situations shows these situations, they aren't real. These are all fabricated, elaborate constructions of things that never actually happened. But they still have a big impact on people's emotions and the way they live their lives, don't they? And this doesn't like limit itself to dreams or movies. You can go to mathematics and talk about how things can be impactful but not real when you talk about imaginary numbers, right? Because imaginary numbers have a real place, and from my experience, they certainly have an important place in like rotational determination of like rotations, stuff like that, right? Like the math for these things is real, and the math for these things can have huge impacts. But An imaginary number is just based off of the square root of -1, which by our consent, unless like we have we completely up in math somehow, which like have a third sign that's not positive or negative, but like I don't think that we could. You know, you can never get the square root of a negative number, just because you can never multiply two numbers together and it be negative. But you can still use that idea, even if it never can happen, to do things with, right? I guess the point here is reality isn't the only thing that has an impact on people. Sometimes unreality has a massive impact. Try talking to somebody who's like schizophrenic and like sees shit all the time. The people who see bugs crawling on their skin. Tell me that is having a real impact in our lives. Tell me that doesn't have a real impact to people, because it does. Tell the people who hear voices in their head or whatever that doesn't have a real impact in their lives, right? We get so caught up on and no, I'm not saying we shouldn't pay attention to what's around us, but solely focusing on what's around us is never going to give you a full picture, and is never going to actually let you experience the fullness of reality. All right, I'm done rambling for today. I've been Alex. This has been the Lost Souls Podcast, and thanks for watching. Peace out.